And then we've looked at the major system, and we've come up with a few pegs. I've given you an example of how to go from 0 to about 100. You may expand that further. Make sure that you know your peg images forwards and backwards. Make sure you also practice knowing how to decipher each major system number into its equivalent peg. So let's look at some applications now. So a major system can be used to remember telephone numbers, to remember dates, historic dates or future dates, to remember a long stream of numbers, to remember a deck of cards, as a peg system for items in this, as was demonstrated earlier. So let's start with memorizing a phone number. So say, for example, you have the phone number +1 608 489 13222. And the technique that I will use here is I'll break this number down to a group of 3 digits each. So the extension 1 can easily be remembered and maybe omitted. So let's start with 608. So 608 translates to Joseph, just to be sure here. So this is a 6, because the J sound. All right. 0 is the S or the Z sound. And here, 8 is the F or V sound. Consequently, 608 translates to Joseph. See the consonants or the sounds are highlighted, and we ignore the vowels, right? So think of a well-known Joseph. Perhaps you might think of the former United States presidents, like Joseph Biden. Right, excellent. Now let's look at the next group, 482. So let's try to decipher the number 402. So 482, 4 represents an R sound. 8 represents an F or V sound. So F or V. And 2, remember, N has 2 strokes downwards, so those represents an N. So an image that can be used to represent 482 is a raven. So raven is the major system equivalent of the number 42, for instance. In other words, too, however, in this case, we will be using raven. So think of a large black raven. Now, let's go on to the final group of digits. The final set of digits translates to Tasmanian. So you may think of a Tasmanian devil, which is a marsupial predator found in Australia. I believe it is now extinct. However, there's another technique that you can use. You can just think of this number as 103, which is TSM. Right, so you could make the word atheism. Atheism would be 103. And 2 could be nanny or none. This is NN, nanny or none or no one. Right? But in this case, we just took this entire group and we came up with the word Tasmanian, and we think of the image of a Tasmanian devil, which is a marsupial predator. Now for the final step, we'll link these 3 images together into a coherent, memorable whole. So we may use the story system, right? We just created just a comprehensive story, or we just link these in a single whole using compelling story. Okay. So what will our story look like? So let's just think about this. So let's just say it's Joseph Biden, right? Is riding on the back of a very large black raven that swoops down and snatches a Tasmanian devil off the ground. So remember to use all your senses, right? A large black swan, perhaps its eyes are glowing, right? And I think of Joseph Biden, think of his suit that he's wearing and how it's flapping in the wind. Think of the large claws, think of the scream and the screech that the Tasmanian devil lets out as it's being stripped off the ground. Use color, use movement, use 3D images. Remember to incorporate all the elements of memory that we have already explored. And now, how may the major system be used to represent, to remember long sequences of numbers? So we may again use the method of breaking the number down into the major system pegs. We then use a link system to link the pegs together creatively. So let's take a look at the 16 number digit. This break it down to images that we can link together. So make sure you use active learning, you become active, and you participate in this exercise. So get a pad of paper and pencil and follow along, please. Okay, so those numbers are strategy in this particular case. We will break this number down into pairs of peg system numbers. So say 49. 49 I represent rope. 27 is the next group, neck. So your major system image might be neck. You might think of a giraffe or of a long neck, a dinosaur, if that was your image. Leaf, so you may think of a leaf. 13, you may think of a dam. 64, you may think of a chair, if that was your major system image. And then 12, you might think of tin. 8, you might think of phone. 61, you may think of shoot, right? Like we might think of a rifleman or something. Whatever your major system peg image that you used, right? Think of these. Now for step 2, how we simply link the images together creatively using the link system. So we may link each pair of images using the link system, as was demonstrated in previous lessons. And now we want to recall. So the initial recall is always very powerful, always very important. So if you've memorized more than 8 digits, then well done, right? Most people struggle to remember 8 digits, right? The important fact is that the higher a person's IQ, the more digits they can recall. So in a very small sense, you've actually increased a certain aspect of your IQ, of your fluid intelligence. So well done. So a small neutron random number memorization is for to attach a little bit of self-aggrandizement here. Using this method, I was able to recall 60 digits in just 1 minute. Of course, this takes a lot of practice. You can certainly accomplish this if you just practice regularly. However, a new memory device called the Memory Palace will be used later, which will simplify the memorization of a long string of digits significantly. So instead of using the link system, right, we're linking each pair of images, in this case, we will use the Memory Palace system, which I will introduce in the upcoming lessons. So another fascinating application of the major system is the remembering of historic dates and historical events. So it is similar to the proposed method for both telephone numbers and long numbers. In most cases, the dates that will be remembered will have a 1. So we may ignore this first digits. For example, we have 1784 or something. So 1784, you may ignore, you may omit the 1, right? You can make phrases, a string of words, or connect 3-digit major system numbers to the dates. So these are some of the strategies you can employ to remember historic dates. And of course, you can link it with images that remind you of this event. So now let's take a look at a few practical examples. So for example, in 1905, Albert Einstein came up with the theory of relativity. Again, we may omit the 1 from 1905, and we are left with the number 905. Now, 905 translates into the major system equivalent of puzzle, right? So puzzled. So you can use the phrase, in 1905, a great puzzle was solved, because Einstein came up with this theory of relativity, which describes certain aspects of our universe, right? This makes it much easier to remember, certainly. Now, the Great Fire of London took place in 1666. So we may omit the 1 again. And then we have 666. In this case, we may remember the phrase ashes, 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 right, which translates into the major system equivalent of 666. So in 666, ashes, 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 the Great Fire in London. That easy. some more examples on historic dates. So the Russian Revolution occurred in 1917. You may omit the one again. And you can remember with the phrase, people demand communism, right? Where each consonant of this particular phrase is the major system equivalent of these numbers. So 9 is P, 1 is D, and communism is 7. So I note that the first letter of each word translates to 917 in the major system. My alternative to 917 includes bad egg in the major system. So we can use some of the memory devices that we spoke about earlier. So you may think of a bad spoiled egg breaking into a famous Russian communist statue, or perhaps a sickle being used to break open a round egg, right? The sickle is one of these symbols of the imagery of communism, for example. So that's just another way of memorizing historic dates. What about dates that are important to you during the year? So say you wish to remember important dates during the year. Say you want to remember your wife's birthday or an anniversary. So it may fall on June 15th, for instance. So you may reserve a section of our major system to accomplish this. So let's suppose we use the first 12 major system pegs as placeholders for the month of the year. Let me just demonstrate how this works. So for January, might be T, right? So you might use this section at the major system, 1 through to 12, right, to represent each month of the year. So January T, February is Noah, March is Ma, April is Ra, and so forth and so on. So Ra, you may think of the Spring Dragon of Ra from Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Ra, the Egyptian god, or something like that, right, as your image, and you will use these as placeholders for the months of the year. Moving on, since your wife's birthday lies on the 15th June, you may use the keyword joy for your major system. The major system translation for 15 may be tall. So 1, 5, tall. Now imagine your wife using a tool to destroy a giant clown statue. Joy, if you use joy for clown statue, which is number 6, translation joy. So you may think of a clown statue. So think of your wife using a tool, 15, to break a giant toy statue, joy. Now I'll remind you that your wife's birthday lies on the 15th of June. So remember to incorporate all your senses on all the known principles of memory to help strengthen this memory and help it really stick. And I've provided a visual aid to visualize this process. So allow me to extend my congratulations once again. In the next lecture, we'll discuss the memorizing of words and vocabulary or language. But before we proceed to the memorization of words, language, and vocabulary, let's just take a small break and look at how we can use the major system to memorize decks of cards.